Welcome to Tales About the Table, where we explore the stories, challenges, and creative chaos of TTRPGs, but mostly D&D. I'm Elijah.
I'm Jack.
And I'm Josiah. Together, we discuss the art of DMing, character building, and making unforgettable moments at the table.
Each episode, we break down a different aspect of tabletop gaming, sharing our experiences, lessons learned, and maybe a few funny failures along the way. Whether you're a seasoned DM or you're just rolling your first set of dice, there's always more to learn about collaborative storytelling.
Sometimes we talk about how to play TTRPGs, the rules, the setup, and everything in between.
Sometimes we talk about how to be better people and communicators, and therefore, better players.
And sometimes we talk about our own misadventures and the lessons that we've learned from the worlds we've created.
But most importantly, we love telling great stories together.
So pull up a chair and join us as we share another of our many tales about the table. Hello, and welcome back to Improvised Tales About the Table. This is kind of the new normal, or maybe not the new normal, but something that we like to do. Sometimes we talk about a topic and we have thought about it. We've asked each other questions. We've bounced ideas off of each other. And then we kind of get a full discussion. Today, we are not doing that at all. We have no idea what we're going to say. No idea what anyone else has prepared or not prepared for this episode. And yeah, we're just going to jump into today's episode of Improvised Tales About the Table. And I'm going to start with one of my favorite topics when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons. I have been told many times before that I use these way too often. I have been told many times before that I give these willy-nilly. But magic items are so freaking great. And I think that we need to start talking about how incredibly important they are to our campaigns, or not incredibly important to your campaigns. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant here about why I love magic items, and then I will allow you guys to be like, hey, I agree with you. Hey, I think you're wrong. Hey, please stop handing out ridiculous magic items. So I'm gonna open up with this and say I thoroughly enjoy magic items. It is so fun to give them. It is so fun to receive them. It is so fun to see them used creatively. I love magic items. That is just, as a person, as a D&D player, love magic items. I have been accused as a DM of giving them out a little bit too liberally. I remember a specific campaign where I gave, I believe it was a 7th or 8th level party, a scroll of wish, just, for fun.
I don't think we were even 7th or 8th level.
Yeah, potentially
yet.
not even that high. And I would definitely agree. This is not something, I'm not trying to defend myself here. I do give out magic items pretty liberally, but I feel like that is, and I remember I actually said this to Josiah the other day before we started playing our last session. It in D&D specifically, which is the TTRPG we played the most, I feel like a lot of times the party is like, well, do we get XP for this? Like, and I want to reward players for doing things, right? If you uncover a puzzle, I want you to get a reward for that. And this actually works really perfect because you just went into a room and found this magic item by completing a puzzle. And it's like, I'm not giving you XP for that. I'm actually giving you this magic item, which is really powerful, or, might add a story element. I think that magic items are a huge and awesome place for you to be able to reward your party, but not have to say anything to, not have to, oh, I guess you're all level 7 now. And like really changing the power dynamics and the scaling that you have for the dungeon that you've prepped. So yeah, I think I want to hear your guys' thoughts on magic items, because we don't talk about this at the table that much. And so I'm very curious where you guys stand on magic items, and then we'll kind of build the conversation from here. So go.
Oh man. Yeah, Jack, go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say, so I'm currently running a campaign, and I think you guys have gotten one magic item in it. And you're like,
Two.
six,
There were two,
what was the
and I have
second one I
both of
gave
them,
out?
unfortunately.
Oh, right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. One of them I don't know if I totally count as a magic item, but that's for different reasons.
That's fair.
And yeah, it is, I guess, by the technical term. Um, and yeah, so two magic items. They're both been like fun, little things. They're not a huge deal. Um, and I've been thinking about it a lot as I've been going through the campaign of like, oh man, I feel like at this point in the campaign, Elijah's given us quite a bit more than this typically, which may or may not be true, but that has been my felt thing. And part of it is like I've put magic items in the game, or the game, I'm running a pre-made dungeon currently in this part of it, and that's put magic items in the game. And you guys have just like walked on past it at times. And
Mm,
I'm like, oh, okay, well, okay, that's fine. I don't want to force you to do anything or take, like, and then it happens again. And it's like, okay, that's fine, like, okay. And I've just been like, well, there is stuff here. Should I like move it around so that you guys do run into it? Kind of force you to do it, quantum ogre it a little bit. So it's like, it doesn't matter that you walked over here and not over there. Like it's gonna show up in front of you.
mm,
And at the very same time, I'm playing in another campaign that Elijah's running right now, and he just had some pretty fun puzzles that we did and we showed up on. And I don't know the inner workings of him DMing behind all of that, uh, but it felt like for us players, we happened to choose the right road, and we ended up with a very dangerous, not all good artifact at 5th level here. And
Seemed like we got super lucky,
it
actually.
seemed like we got really lucky.
Yeah.
It seemed like that was prepared. And Elijah, you don't need to answer one way or another. I'm not
I
asking you
was
any
I
of
was
this.
not intending to.
Good. Um,
It's intentional.
and
He lied.
well, I mean, I get it. I get that there's this place where it's like, no, I had some of this prep. They didn't do it exactly how I was thinking, but good enough, close enough, like it's gonna be there. And so for us, it felt like, oh wow, this is kind of cool. It felt like we'd lucked into kind of the exact right method to get this, and we didn't have to do all this backtracking to figure it out. And that was really fun. It made us feel pretty clever and pretty on top of things. And then rewarded us with a magic item that was really powerful, but it took a long time for us to figure out who even wanted to use it. You're like, oh man, I don't know. I don't know if I want to use this.
This is a big
Do you want to
deal.
use this? Like,
Yeah.
you can have it if you
Oh,
want. Somebody in the party should use it, but like, I don't know if I want to. And I think that that's really good. And so I guess, I'm just sharing stories here, but to extrapolate a little bit from these stories, um, actually, before I do that, I'm going to share one last story. Elijah talked about a scroll of wish. That was not the most atrocious magic item handed out in that
no,
campaign. The most
not even.
atrocious magic item handed out in that campaign, in my opinion, was giving a level 1 character the robe of the Archmagi. That was the most atrocious, egregious offense in that regard. It
For your character specifically.
That's
Like
fair.
that.
It's not
But
just
yes.
giving that magic item to anybody, it's giving it to a character that can make incredible use of it. Who has good dexterity, so he's going to end up with a really high armor class, who really could use the boost to saving throws because he's going to cast a lot of spells. Like that is kind of
Yeah.
a specific character build of a bit of a melee caster. And yeah, so those three stories. You have a DM who's trying to figure out if you should give out more magic items. You have a DM that gives out, pretty crazy stuff, and then you have a DM that like just kind of hands stuff to the party at the beginning of the game. And I feel like we've grown and are currently growing. Whenever we do this, we learn more about what works and what doesn't and how it goes along. And I feel like in each one of those things, you see kind of progression. Like magic items are this really scary thing for DMs, especially new DMs at times. I remember when I first played, leveling up my players was really scary, and giving out magic items was really scary. And I didn't do either of those things. I don't think I gave out a single magic item, and I know I didn't level them up the entire campaign. And we didn't like play a ton. I think it was like
We
10
didn't, yeah, there wasn't
sessions.
a ton of combat either.
Yeah, it was like 10 sessions, but still 10 sessions with not a single level up, and you guys are like low level. It was crazy.
Did we never
Um
level up for real?
You never leveled up. You
Were
were
we
third
level
level the
3 or
entire. Yeah, I started you guys off at level 3 because I was like,
okay.
I've heard level 1 is like really easy to kill people, and I've never played or DM'd before, but I don't want
Uh,
to kill everybody in the first combat because
yeah.
I've never balanced any of this before. And so it was like, I'm gonna have you guys start at level 3, and then I never leveled you up the entire campaign. And it was like, yeah, again, not super long. It was my first time. We didn't play
Which,
forever,
now
and
that I
we
think about it, may have affected how I view D&D and level up. In my head, it's like, why are we leveling up so fast? I feel like it's supposed to take way longer than this. And I think that that might be partially because of that campaign that I didn't even think about that till
That's really
now.
funny. So I was using a milestone technique for that campaign. Um,
Uh,
and basically I was like, oh yeah, you guys will need to get like 5 milestones per level up. So I had to have 5 significant things happen to you guys where it like really resonated. And I think we were at like 10 levels in. And I was like, you guys are so close to a level up. So yeah, it was awful. Um, I was learning, obviously. I had no idea. And yeah. Anyway, beside the point. I I did give out, I think, a single magic item in that entire game too, which is also fascinating. So there
wow.
was this place too where I just think it's really fascinating. When I look at magic items, they are, not typically built in to balancing. They're because you don't know what they're going to give out. Now they've tried to do that more with the 2025 rules and tried to give you more of a system of like, here's the type of magic items they should have. And if I'm being honest, in the current campaign I'm running, I am following that system fairly closely. I'm not trying to break that. Partly because I'm like, let's use it. Let's see how it works. If it's something that I don't like after I've tried it, then I can break that system and do what I want. I've also I played in a lot of campaigns where I've gotten a lot of powerful magic items at the beginning, and that can obviously cause issues. But also at the same time, I think there's a place where like it doesn't cause as many issues the smaller your group is. And I think
Yeah.
that's the one point I would emphasize. Like there's a bunch of different styles of doing this. There's a bunch of different kind of ways to do it. But the smaller your group is, the more you can be liberal with this because they're going to need the help. And you don't want to kill them in every combat. And you want them to
Yeah.
have fun toys. And you can kind of keep track of it a little more. And if you really overextend yourself, you can have a conversation and be like, look, we need to figure out a way to cut out some of these magic items because they're becoming an issue. Like, and you can do those things when you're playing with 2 players, or 3
Yeah.
players. When you are playing with 4 to 6 players, it starts to become like you need to give out a lot of magic items, but you can't give out really powerful ones. Like everybody in the party wants to be using a magic item of some sort, wants to be feeling like they're a part of the game or having fun. But you can't be doing like, oh man, every single, time you're getting this or that.
And now
Powerful
everyone
magic
has a
item.
flame tongue.
Yeah. So I
Nice.
do think I feel like I am at the stage where I can share a lot of stories and have some ideas, but I don't think that I've learned this one yet. I think Elijah maybe has a little bit more comfortability with like, no, I think this is where I like to be as a DM. I think I'm kind of like, I want to learn what I really enjoy here as a DM. And
Yeah.
that means making some mistakes. And this is an area that I've just refused to do because I'm scared of making mistakes, you know?
Yeah. I think there is a little bit of a misnomer, or maybe not a misnomer, but like I think there maybe is a I want to flip the script actually when it comes to magic items because I think a lot of DMs uh think about magic items as well. If I give them magic items, then I'm giving my players like the ability to control their power level. Like they get to like I'm actually letting go of more power by giving my players any magic items, and now it feels like they could break the game that way. And I actually think that magic items serve the opposite purpose of giving the DM actually more control than what they had before. Because what the DM does not have the control to do is if I'm the DM, I can't pick what class you're gonna be, how you're like what you're gonna like what your power level is gonna be, which subclass you're gonna choose, whether or not you're gonna be able to interact well with your other players, like on a combat level. Like I can't control that. You have to decide that. I maybe could influence a little, be like during character creation, be like, oh, this subclass is really powerful. I was like, oh, we actually could really use someone who can heal because otherwise we're not gonna get very like I could do that a little bit, but for the most part, the DM really can't that's an area of the game that the DM really can't control because that is player that is player creation, that's player built. And so using magic items actually allows you to like it gives you a little bit more options as far as like trying to balance your players a little bit. Um like if you have players if you have certain characters who are not as strong, giving them a magic item to bump their power level a little bit can absolutely be something that it gives you the option to have a little bit more safety and security in the monsters you throw at them because you know that they're going to be fine against this. Like if you're playing a campaign and you know there are a ton of vampires, putting something that does radiant damage, which is vulnerable to those creatures, actually makes it a lot easier for for whoever has that magic item, whoever has the ability to do that, and so you kind of like are able to like push push into it and give out a little more power. And on the flip side too, because you can give out cursed items as well. That's a little, you gotta be careful with that
Yeah.
because
I
but
will say, so I can we make this more of a discussion too? And I'm
sure,
sorry
sure.
if you're
No,
going somewhere, we can pause and because
no,
we
that's
didn't
about where
talk
I
about
was
this.
at.
But I am like, okay, yes, I hear what you're saying. But there also is a place where like there is an end of things. For example, the first time I played an optimized character where I was like, oh, I want to build a powerful character. It very much unbalanced a campaign. It wasn't that I'd gotten a ton of magic items that worked well. I had one magic item that was pretty effective and a few others too.
I
But
don't even remember what magic item you had.
I had a dancing sword, which was kind of fun. It didn't like make or
Oh
break my
yeah,
build, but it was like, oh, cool, I could make a bonus action attack, like that type of
yeah,
deal. Um,
nice little extra.
yeah, it was cool. I loved the flavor of it. The thing is, though, like in that campaign, Elijah ended up having to give so many magic items out to the other players to try and make some sort of
Ah,
balance where they weren't
Sure.
going to die. And there ended up coming to this place where it was like, well, do just like it just felt really lopsided. It was like I might kill them if I throw something too hard at them because they're very, optimization is basically saying, hey, I'm not going to care about these things. I am going to care about these things. And I'm going to build this to the nth degree. So if I'm doing tons of damage, that's so cool. I also don't have a lot of health and you're going to kill me really fast. And so if you throw this thing that's like, oh yeah, he's going to hit for 30, hit points around, fifth, sixth level, it's like, oh wow, that's going to really hurt us, like that's going to
Yeah.
take us out pretty quickly. Um, so I don't know. I think that I definitely get some of the issues of like, oh man, I threw a lot of these magic items out, and this was so fun, but now, and I use them to try and tweak the builds. And the other thing I'll say about that is like, you don't, you giving it to them, you've released control over it. You
Right.
can't be like, hey, I made this for that player. It needs to get into their hands. Unless you do that out of game, you can have that
Right.
conversation with your players and be like, look, guys, I made this because I wanted this player to have it, and the barbarian took it and is now doing even more damage, and that's great. But like, I was trying to balance it out so people felt,
Right.
more fair or involved.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
You can do
And
that a little bit with theming though, like depending on how you do it. Like the wizard is not gonna take the full plate. Yeah, like
well,
some of that
that's a
is can be
mechanical
done for you.
thing,
Mhm.
but I have heard of, if not as much seen, people be like, I'll just take a level in, when cleric dips could get you full plate,
Yeah.
proficiency. Like, I'll just
Yeah.
take a level in cleric here real quick, and now I can use it on our next level up. And it's like, I really intended for the person who could use it currently to be the one to use it, not for you to hold on to it until you can. Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
I
do hear you
also
there, though.
I also think that like um as someone who doesn't like to quantum ogre my magic items, like, hey, I I want this to go to my wizard, who just rolled a 2 on their perception check, and the barbarian, who has not been doing great on their perception this whole entire campaign, decided to nat 20, and it's like, you see, this magic item or whatever this may be, and so like there is a place where, yeah, I kind of think that there is a kind of, okay, it's out there, it exists. Like, I am placing the magic item in the world. I am not saying that the magic item is like one specific character's, unless I think that there are, you can also do this in story beats. I don't think that it's like, I
Right.
don't think you just have to tell the whole table like, hey, I want to like kind of balance the power dynamics here, but like, hey, um you can kind of, you know, uh, prime example would be like, you have, and I know a guy, and it's like, hey, they have procured this for you.
Mhm.
And they're like, hey, found this, kind of was thinking about you, or
Yeah, owe me
like,
one.
yeah, you owe me one. Um, always giving the party more plot hooks
Uh,
of like, hey, at some point I'm gonna call in a favor and you owe me if you
right.
take this.
You
Um,
got a letter from mom. It says,
yeah,
"Hey, I found this old cloak that you used to wear as a kid. Thought I'd
yeah,
send it your way."
yes,
It's a
but
cloak of
also like,
invisibility. That's what it is. I don't know
thanks, Harry Potter.
where you got this.
I
Ah.
do think though that there is a place where, um, yeah, I think there is a. I have seen some really cool things as well at a table where, um, at that table where I was like, okay, everyone needs to feel powerful. Like the rest of the party got to the point where they were like, but Jack is so powerful, we're just gonna try to like have him just do all the damage. Like that's a viable strategy. And they were enjoying that, right? And so I think that there also is a place where, um and this is just like random DM tidbit of like, don't outthink your players at every turn.
Mhm.
And Jack and Josiah, like, you can absolutely smack me over the back of the head for that. But don't overthink your players at every turn. Like, there is a place where it's like, hey, just let them kind of figure it out a little bit.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, on that same point, like if they're taking the risk of saying, "Hey, we know these combats are going to be hard," like I'm not protecting my character as much here because
yeah,
I think that making this character stronger is actually the best benefit for us in combat. Well, that's a decision that your character made. That this is not you've not this is not a problem with mechanics and like the players breaking the game. Now this has become a story decision of we have decided
yeah.
making this character stronger is going to be better for us in game.
Yeah.
Like changing a problem from a game problem to a story problem is always a better
Yes,
scenario.
that was another
Yeah,
thing that I did
for
want to come
sure.
back
Well
to
said.
was like um you mentioned cursed magic items, and I was like, yes, that's one aspect, but also just like there are a lot more magic items even in the DMG that have drawbacks,
Yeah.
that have a negative side effect. That it's like, hey, um you're a good aligned paladin. I'm so glad. This is an evil aligned sword, and it might give you a boost, but also it doesn't have your best interests. You can attune to it, you can use it, but it might have negative consequences to you using it. You might have to fight the sword that you just picked up. You might have to, you know, pay someone by using the weapon because they procured it for you. And it's like, hey, I'm going to give you this magic item. In return, you have to go do this shady deal. That there are so many things that I think you can do really cool story elements for magic items of like, hey, this
Yeah.
makes you really powerful, but oh, every time that you I remember Josiah played a character and is still playing a character that has a pipe of remembrance, I think it is.
Yep.
Um, and he was like, "Yeah, I use this magic item to um like
We
the
homebrew
smoke.
it a little.
Yeah, we changed it a little bit, but it's like it. I relived like this really hard thing that happened in my life through this smoke of this pipe of remembrance, and it's like that's really cool story wise, and you're choosing to do that. So, you
Right.
know, I think it would be very interesting of like, hey, what happens when that magic item gets taken away, right? What happens when that the character it's like, hey, you're faced with you have to pay for this in some capacity. And it's like, well, hey, you got a nice pipe here. I'd pay. I'll, I would take that as payment. And it's like, well, that has sentimental value to me.
Right.
Despite maybe it's not a powerful magic item, but it's a
Yeah.
important magic item that I think that can also be so fun. Um, so yeah,
Right.
I'm a big magic item guy. Um, Big time going to advocate for more of them in your
Yeah.
campaigns. Um, litter litter your dungeons with magic items. No, you do not need to put a flame tongue in every corner. That's not what I'm saying. But put a rival coin in a dungeon in a treasure pile, right? Like there are small little things that it's like that
Yeah.
is such a it's a token. It's just a hey, you found the little thing here. Good job,
Mhm.
keep moving forward as
Yeah.
a nice little piece for your campaigns.
I
Yeah.
do, before we move on from this,
Of
because I'm
course.
sensing that we're probably gonna step in a different direction. I do want to say one last thing. I Something just clicked with me as you were talking about magic items, and it was the realization of like at the game table, like if you have the players, you have the DM, but even a step behind that, you have the developers, the people who made this game,
Mhm.
and there is an incentive on their part to be like, hey, we have this fantasy of what it looks like to play D&D. We have this idea of what it looks like to play D&D. And we want you to want to play out that fantasy to a certain extent. So we are going to build mechanics that encourage this fantasy.
Yeah.
For example, like if you're playing a barbarian, you want them to feel like they are this, machine that runs into battle and can take way more damage than everyone else and dish out a ton of damage and super reckless. And it's like, how do we make this play out in game? Well, we're going to give them a rage mechanic that reduces the damage they're taking and fulfills that fantasy of the Viking or whatever that we have
Yeah.
historical stories of, and that has made its way into the cultural like mind. um, and we try to make mechanics that reflect that. But then at times you have mechanics like reckless attack, which on the outset, it's about making more reckless attacks. So you get advantage, but you're opening yourself up. And so you're going to take more damage, but it also doesn't incentivize the type of play you want, where it's like the barbarian runs into the midst of all of these whole bunch of creatures without a care because he's, just going to do damage. And it's like the more creatures that surround the barbarian, the less the barbarian wants to use reckless attack because he's giving that benefit to more creatures. And so it actually disincentivizes the type of play that you want to experience at the table. And it just dawned on me how big of a role magic items can play in your game, partly because it is about incentivizing behavior. For example, D&D incentivizes to an nth degree combat because
Yeah.
that's the only way to level up by the official rules. You can do it with, like different ways, and it acknowledges that there are other ways to do it, but
Right.
officially it's by killing monsters, you gain XP and then you level up. Therefore, every player at the game, no matter what class they're playing, is incentivized to kill monsters. But then you also have this with magic items. Every player at the game is incentivized to find magic items because it's going to fill in the gaps in their build. It's going to make them able to do more and creative things. It's like this is your tool as a dungeon master that the developers of the game said, here, you always have something that they want. And that is going to push this story forward, whether they care deeply about it or not. Whether they're, it's like that is a tool that the dungeon master always has. And I think I do a poor job of telegraphing magic items now that I'm thinking about it, in the sense of like, this is a tool to get people more involved in the story. And a lot of what we talked about was how it
Yeah.
roots itself into the story. A good magic item is more important to the story than it is to the mechanics. And realizing that
Yeah.
using a good magic item is not about giving them these power boosts, nerfing or buffing characters that you feel like need nerfed or buffed. Those are all fine. But I think the true power of a magic item is incentivization. It is you having a control over what they want. I saw Matthew Colville talk about it at one point where he was like, he talked about giving out quests, where he's like, I will give cards to the PCs, the player characters at the table, that say, if you do this, you will get this. That could be a level up, it could be a magic item, it could be, a story beat that they'd asked for. Um, Something though, and it's like that character is going to do that thing once you hand them that card. They are
Uh-huh.
going to be like, this is my motivation, I'm going to do this. And it can really be good at rooting them into the game. It's a little video gamey, but there's a reason video games use this. It is how you incentivize your character to have motivation in the scene and to move forward. And realizing that, I was like, not that you have to do that with every magic item. I think you definitely should sprinkle in some unexpected ones and stuff like that. It's exactly what Elijah was saying. But I was like, oh man, it really clicked in my head. This is a tool that the developers handed the DM to incentivize players to the actions they want them to be incentivized towards. And I was like, that just made a lot of sense for me.
Yeah.
So,
I love that. Um, yeah, let's keep moving here. I love this conversation about magic items. I want to take us in a different direction now.
Let's go. I'm excited.
Which I
We're
could have magic
improvising.
items could be included. All right. I want to talk about using pre-made content in your games, whether that is running modules, whether that is pulling in homebrew that other people have made, whether that is like outsourcing to just using things that have already been done for you. I want to talk about what that looks like compared to just building out a lot of your own materials. I know that there are a lot of people who definitely lean on the side of, well, like D&D is all about storytelling and creation and all of these things. So using other materials is like cheating. You're not it's not doing anything. I know there's a
Mm,
lot of like, especially um like, I mean, I don't know that we necessarily want to get into the conversation of AI and D&D, but there are a lot of people that are very against AI and D&D um because they feel like the game is about creation, and if you're using something else to create for you, well, you're not really playing the game. But I like so much of like, and we've talked about this so many times, but like a lot of what we use is for inspiration, right? It's not that we don't have the ability to create from scratch. But when like it's hard.
yeah.
There are a lot of things that you have to do, and as a DM, there are a lot of pieces that you have to keep moving. There are a lot of things that you need to generate. There's a lot of things that you have a lot of decisions that you have to make every single session as you play. And certain things, when you take the pressure off of having to create and keep track of and run all of these things, it actually frees you up to be more creative in other aspects of the game. Um, like it's for me, it's easier to use just a whole bunch of pre-generated stat blocks, and I can just pull them up and run them when I need to because I don't really wanna worry about all of that. I wanna focus on the story elements. I'm gonna lean into these things. Yeah, let me pull up a monster. Let me run this real quick. Yeah, I'll just do that. Like, I don't know that I necessarily prep those out to the nth degree every single time because I kind of want the freedom to kinda just go, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of different aspects to it as far as, like, this is just sort of my take on it, but even moving, like, aside from that conversation, talking through modules, there in on the exact flip side of that, actually, there are some people who, like, yeah, I find it hard to run the story and to run all of the mechanics, so I'm actually just gonna let the story kind of already be generated, and I'm gonna really focus on making this a really clean game. I'm gonna make sure all the mechanics are perfect. I'm gonna get all of this stuff done. I'm gonna lean into enhancing the story as much as possible with the perfect monsters and how they're interacting in every combat and I'm gonna put all these magic items right where they should be, and I'm gonna make sure I know every NPC and exactly how they would interact with all of these things, and I'm gonna focus on all of this. And the story's kind of just gonna tell itself because I'm playing out of this module that I have, you know? And so I think there's a lot of benefit to, again, just using those to free up your opportunity to be creative in other aspects. What are you guys thinking as far as some of these conversations go? What are some of your thoughts?
Yeah. Um, I I am very much I do a lot of the creation process on my own. Um, but I remember I ran the Curse of Strahd, and I actually
Yeah.
ran it inside of a campaign that we were already running. Um, and so I um and part of that was due to um just me being burnt out as a DM of like I have so much on my plate outside of playing Dungeons and Dragons and outside of playing this game, like I can't really keep up while I'm also working on classes and also doing, going to work and trying to, have a social life. All of those things kind of bogged down just my enjoyment in the game. And so we kind of pushed, um, we kind of pushed to play a module. And I was like, I can run Curse of Strahd. I had just bought the whole revamped
Revamped.
Tombstone kind of box set
It
that
looks so
came with it,
cool.
and it's so awesome. I love it. Um, and I will just say, like, it refreshed me on Dungeons and Dragons entirely because it was like, if you are a DM and you are ever at a place where you're like, well, that just like ruins the game, like the creation of the game. It does not, I promise you. Like, there are so many
Yeah.
things that one, you have full control. It is not like a script that is like, oh yeah, the character does this exactly. You can tweak things, you can change some motivations, you can change the character, like changing a character voice to be like from a squeaky and kind of shy to a confident and overbearing. Like that subtle tweak on a character will completely change how your party might
Oh,
interact
yeah.
with them. And I think and the Curse of Strahd is obviously one of the most well-known and, like, wonderful, um, examples of, like, a really good module to run, but there is something really awesome when you can choose what you wanna focus on as a dungeon master. There are some things that you get to kind of be like, "Oh, I don't have to do this because it's already done for me." Or you can say, I'm so glad that you already did that, but I'm actually going to redo this because I like it better this way. But one of my favorite things is I, as a dungeon master, know that my biggest weakness is describing rooms. I am not J.R.R. Tolkien. I cannot take 10 minutes to describe a door. It's like, it's a door. There's a lock on it. Great. That's the room you're in. And so to have these like, hey, when they enter this room, read this paragraph. I was like, this is amazing. Can I have this for every room that like my party ever enters forever? Because in a completely separate scenario in the same campaign, when we were not in the Curse of Strahd, I had such a trouble describing a staircase to one of my players that they didn't understand that they were not going to break line of sight, and so they're like, "Well, I want to cast disguise self and then turn around on the staircase and look like a different person going the other way." And I'm like, "But they would see you the whole time that you're doing this." And I'm like, "No, no, no, I'm going
Like, what
around
do
a
you mean?
corner."
Yeah.
Uh,
He's like, "There's no
and,
corner."
and there
What are you
there
talking
was
about?
yeah, and we had I think a 30-40 minute break of just like going back and forth and around and then laughing about it as well.
I
Like
don't
we
know how
had
much we laughed about it
okay.
other than angry
And
laughter
in the
later.
moment, there was some frustration, but I
there
think it had to do
there
with
was
other
some
things as
frustration.
well.
But like
Maybe.
genuinely, we went around on that for a while. And so there is a real benefit to, hey, this is what this is like. This is what the shape is. This is, the room is square. It has this in the center. It has this on the outskirts. There is this inside the room. And that is
Yeah.
super awesome. And so yeah, I'm a huge I'm a huge fan of doing the running a module, but don't feel like if you have to, um, don't feel like you have to. Um,
Right.
by all means, run your campaign and play. Um, like if you want to write it all, write it all.
Right.
Um, I
Yeah.
I I want to run some more modules. I had such a great time running the Curse of Strahd. It's technically the only module I've ever run in its
Yep.
entirety. I've started a couple others, and I've run an adventure out of like Candlekeep Mysteries. But yeah, I big fan. I'm all for using modules and pre-written things. Um, yeah, I won't get into the AI because I could go a whole hour on that by myself. So
Ah,
I won't tackle
yeah.
that today, but I want to hear Jack's thoughts on
Yeah, I
modules
do
and
too. I have another thing to
um
say, but go ahead,
yeah.
Jack. I would love to
Yeah,
hear your thoughts as well.
yeah, no problem. I and I think if you haven't caught this, if you haven't been listening to a lot of our episodes, I am pretty definitively like the other side of the coin from Elijah here. Um, majority of campaigns I run are connected to a module, maybe not a official module. Um,
Yeah.
Truly, my first campaign that I ran wasn't. Um, but then after that, I
It's been
think
all uphill since then.
every single campaign I've run since then, which is quite a few, have been
Yeah.
connected to a module in some way. Not always I'm using this exactly. Sometimes it's like, look, I watched somebody else you run this module, so it is loosely based off this module. I'm not going to like buy the book and go through everything and learn all of it, especially since our campaigns, everyone probably experiences this to a certain extent, don't always finish these modules. So I'm going to use this as a loose framework of where to start and some of the plot
Yeah.
hooks and then go from there. That isn't to say I don't enjoy building stuff. I've been working on settings in my own free time. I have one that I'm really excited to maybe run, which is not built off of a module, but a TV show that I was watching. So it's like,
Nice.
clearly, I like to just rip things off. And the main reason I like to do this is because I am burnt out as a DM when I have to come up with stuff all the time. I love tweaking things. I love stories. It's not because I dislike stories that I don't like doing this. I
Right.
just know the hardest part of a story for me is getting bogged down in all of the details of this and that, and this room and that room. And I can spend hours that I don't have in my life right now. And I will definitely not have in my life going forward. It's only going to get busier, you know, writing descriptions for rooms. And so to a certain extent, I have to go, look, I got to go find this somewhere else. Either it's not going to be there or but I can't do this. Somebody else has done it and probably got paid for doing it. I'll pay them a little bit for doing that. Like I don't really care all that
Yeah.
much. But to a certain extent, if I want to enjoy this hobby, I have to know what I can and can't do. And this is
Right.
something that I don't feel like I can do, at least not to the polish that I'd want it to be at,
Right.
especially when somebody else has done it to that polished state. And so I've really had to learn as a DM that yes, there are some places where it's like, oh, I would have done that differently. And you kind of go, okay, either you take the time to tweak it or you just go with it because sometimes it's okay if it's not perfect or exactly what you envisioned. It's okay
Yeah.
if the room has a doorway here or not a doorway there. And it leads to some improvisation at times, but oftentimes the book's got you and you're like, okay, like I can keep going. And I don't feel like I have to read the entire book before I start. I will often read the
Yeah.
essential sections and the end so I know where we're headed. And that's it, and like I'll keep running with that. And that keeps it fresh for me. I'm not sitting there, going, "Oh, I'm just so excited for them to get to this point," because who knows? They might not ever get to that point,
Right.
Like I find something every session that I get to be excited about. So, I am a huge proponent of like I encourage running modules. If you haven't done it, do it at least once because the parts of DMing that are burning you out may not actually be an issue if you are willing to not take on, because people don't typically tell you this as blatantly as we've talked about it, but there is an underlying current in this hobby of like, hey, you need to be being creative as a DM. Like DMs are all about creativity and building your own world. And you hear these stories of like, I spent years masterfully crafting this homebrew world and then I ran it. And it's like, and you got 10 sessions out of it and you didn't DM that entire time because you were had to have this perfect world, and it's like that's cool. I'm really glad that you got to work on that world, and if that's the fun part of D&D for you, do it because it's about having fun. But
Yeah.
at the same time, if this feels stressful or it feels like it detracts from the other parts of the game you love, sometimes there's a place to say, hey, I really enjoy this, but not for this game. I'll do it for my novels, I'll do it for my personal writing and stuff like that. I'll tweak this setting, but if this is what takes away from me enjoying D&D, then maybe this isn't what's supposed to be a part of it for me. Elijah seemed like he had a thought, so I'll
Yeah,
stop there.
I did just want to also put on the flip side of that though too, like if you have a tiny idea and you're like, well, I'm not sure that this is perfect, please don't be afraid to, like, your world does not have to be perfect. I
Yeah,
think also there is this, the other side of that kind of avalanche can be, well, I don't have a world that compares to the D&D that I watch online, and it's
for
like,
sure.
you are watching Critical Role. They make money. They are getting paid to do this
This
level
is
of production.
careers.
Like, they yeah, they made careers out of this. And
I
these are
don't play
people that,
basketball like the NBA. Yeah,
yeah.
no kidding. It's not you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so
Mhm.
just keeping in
No,
mind
yeah, it
that,
really is. It really is tough.
sorry, um, I kinda lagged out there for a sec, but
Yeah.
keeping in
Um,
mind that, like, there is a place where you as a DM and, like, also as players, but, like, as a DM, don't ever feel like your D&D is not good enough just because, like, it doesn't compare well. Like, my campaigns do not compare well to Critical Role. However, I have gotten some of the same reactions from players as people that have, as those that are, at the table at Critical Role. Not because I'm as good as Matthew Mercer, but because D&D is a game where we like to have fun and tell stories.
yep,
And you can get invested in the simplest and the most complex stories all at once.
right.
And yeah, like, don't gatekeep your D&D.
Mhm.
Have fun. It's a
Yeah,
game.
right. And like I think what I was gonna say about what Jack was getting at too, of like he was saying know what you have capacity for. Like he was like, I know that I don't have the capacity to build out like a description for every room, so I'm gonna use a module for it. He chose that path because what he wanted was a very polished style of D&D.
Mm.
You
Mhm.
don't have to go to a module. You can just not have a polished style of D&D.
Mhm.
Like you very much can just wing it. Walk into a room you don't have a description for and make up a description when you get there. Like you can it doesn't have to be this super polished thing. You don't have to describe every single room to the nth degree. It can just be, hey, you walk into a room, it's a regular room. It this is you walk into a town, it has all of the things that a regular town would have. So whatever you think is there is probably there. Ask me and maybe it's there. Like it doesn't have to be super polished. If you're looking for super polished, then you can build it out or you can create a module, but it doesn't have to be that either.
I want to clarify too, because actually, I'm glad that you said that, because now I know a little bit of how that came off. Both of you guys responded well to it. And I want to clarify because specifically, I am totally saying do a module because you need to have polished D&D. I would use a module even if I'm not having to do a really
Sure.
polished game because the time that I want to spend prepping, because to a certain extent, you have to prep a little bit. Like, I know that I disagree maybe with Josiah, we'll say right now. Josiah's run a lot more one shots, and you
Eh,
truly can improv the crap out of them. But when you start to
whew.
have a coherent story that, like, where you remember what's happened in the last session and like are
Uh-huh.
building off of that, there are times where it's like, no, like locations and rooms and stuff like that begin to be pretty important. What does this room look like? And there also is this place where if you want to have the players able to interact with things in that room, it is hard to improv interactable things. I found that to be the case. Not impossible by any means, but like it's like, oh, I want there to be a chandelier that, Johnny Depp can swing from to get his muffin. Like I want there to
Yeah.
be something that can happen there. Um and so there is this place where like I do think that can be important and difficult, but I don't always use modules for like, oh man, they're room to room descriptions. I use them because I want to focus on story and character. Like
Yeah.
as a DM, that's what I enjoy. That I know that's what I enjoy. And I've had to give up other things that I enjoy because I've realized that I don't have the time, so I have to pick something. Um, And that is more what I'm trying to say. Of like, I'm not saying I don't enjoy writing descriptions or I don't enjoy improving or whatever. Or that I have to have a certain polish of game. I am saying I figured out that I have to choose between what I enjoy to do this and not get burned out. And so I am choosing characters and story because I love those things, and I would love to sit down and write, motivations for villains, or write, how this interplay could happen between these characters, and give different options for the future, and then have a module that can kind of back me up when I'm not writing
Yeah.
all of the other stuff, and I don't have to use it all the time, but I use it so that I don't have to do all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and so I feel like for both of you guys, like you were like, hey, like it's okay to be creative and put stuff in there. And it's like totally like
Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to say is I want it
Yeah.
to be
Right.
easier so you can be creative and do what you want, like
Right.
Of
so that
course.
it isn't always
Right.
you
And
have to.
and I want to jump in and real quick say, like from a player's perspective, I know for me, like we've talked a ton about session zero or like or session -1, like like talking about the game before we even get anywhere close to starting. And I know for me, I've been pretty hesitant in the past about like, no, I don't really want to play a module. I feel like it's gonna be too scripted. I really would prefer if we build a world, and I think for me, like I kind of feel sometimes like I don't want to be held to, yeah, well, I don't really want to play your story. I want to still have the freedom to do whatever I want to. If you're like this module is like, well, it has an end goal that I'm gonna have to get to, and that feels too forced to me. And I think that's probably on me as a mistake of not necessarily understanding how this game works or how to use a module. And I almost think you can kinda do it without even I take this with a grain of salt, but I almost think you can kinda just run a module without it necessarily talking through that, especially with your players. Because how you run it and how you play it kinda
Like,
just
are you
depends on how
saying
you do.
that you don't tell your players you're running a module, or are you saying that you don't like do the story of the module? I guess I'm confused there.
Um, More you don't necessarily tell them you're doing a module. I'm not saying you
You're
need
in a
to.
magical land named
Yeah, like, because
Barrowville,
because
and
realistically,
you can't leave, and there's a werewolf king that has been here for several years
yeah, I'm not trying to say pawn off the
named
information, like, the game as
Strayhand.
your own.
The Curse of Strayhand. uh,
Yeah, I don't know, this is not a
uh,
fleshed out thought.
No, no,
My
no,
no.
point is, like, your world is gonna be built anyways, so
yeah,
it's
Mhm.
no,
like the
I
module is
I
yeah.
get what you're saying, and I do totally understand kind of the aspect of like a player can feel trapped because like when you're designing a character, right, and you're like, oh, I want to do this, and then it's like, okay, awesome, your goal is to like, uh, you know, become the greatest pirate king of all time, and it's like, awesome, um, so this is Tomb of Annihilation, and um you want to go and be a good hero boy and make sure that the people can be resurrected again with magic, and you're like, but literally why? That's not like my character doesn't
I
need
don't want
that.
that.
And the reality is like,
Yeah.
going back to, hey, have a good session zero, you have to create the character with the campaign in mind. And so I do think like there's a place where I have to, as a DM, tell you a little bit of like what we're doing. um
Right.
but I think that there is a place maybe I could not tell you specifically like, hey, we're running Tomb of Annihilation, and I could say, hey, there's like, this is what's going on, and kind of set the scene for you there. But
Yeah, there's this world I'm running.
yeah.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
That's
and I
interesting
I
though,
would
because you
say
do
though, I think
man.
what's really being discussed here is a good DM versus a bad DM. a bad DM running a module, you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna be railroaded." And you're like, "Yeah, but a bad DM running not a module, you're still gonna get railroaded." Like,
Yeah.
that's what's going
Yeah.
to happen because they have a story in mind and they're trying to use you to tell this story, and they're not, and I say bad DM not morally speaking, but just has not maybe figured out the differences between this and novel writing yet.
I
You know,
say
like,
that morally, you're morally a bad person. No, I'm
You're a
um
corrupt DM.
but like you may not have figured out the difference between this and novel writing, and you may not have figured out like how to do this super effectively or to incentivize your characters so that they have motivations going into these things. um but I do think there's this place where it's like, man, yeah, if a bad DM runs a module, you're going to feel railroaded because they're like, look, the next chapter says that you guys have to go to the goblin camp. And so we aren't doing anything else until you guys go to the goblin camp. And it's like, well, we don't really have motivation to do that. And first of all, a good DM isn't going to do those things. He's going to try and build motivation and plot hooks. A well written module isn't
Mhm.
going to do those things. A well written module tries to build motivation and plot hooks, not just
Yeah.
drop a character randomly into a story and say, well, they're going to go here because they're the hero. And it's like, no, like
You are
they
stuck in this
need
land. You
incentive.
can't leave. You
Yeah.
have to leave. Your motivation is to leave.
Well,
That's
that's part of the
Strahd.
beauty of Strahd, is
Yeah.
Strahd builds in a motivation. It doesn't matter your background or where you're coming from, you're trapped and you have to get out. Because anybody can get on board with that. You can have evil and good people in the same party that both want to get out. And yeah, that is part of the reason it feels like there's great motivation going into that campaign is, look, you're all in the same position and you're all trying to get to the same place because you have to, or you accept life here and we'll roll up another character, like that, that type of idea. So I think that part of the argument going on here, or discussion going on here, is like, well, what about when a bad DM does this? And it's like, well, yeah, when a bad DM does it, they're going to run it poorly, but they're also going to do that with their homebrew games. It's not like
Sure,
that's
we all
going to
feel like bad
change.
DMs,
Yeah.
so take that with a grain of salt too.
Of
I feel like a
course.
bad DM.
And
We're all
I
bad
think
DM.
this is a good spot to kind of
Yeah.
wrap up here.
Yeah.
As always, we don't claim to have all of the answers. And especially not the right ones. And so yeah, just we hope that this has been fun talking about some magic items, talking about modules, or running your own homebrew stuff. Obviously, there's not a wrong way to play D&D, as long as you're having fun. Um, Thank you for joining us for today's episode, Improvised Tales About the Table. And we hope that you will join us again next week. Thank you guys, and have a good one. See ya.